We've got even more head coaching buzz, news, and rumors to get to on today's show. But we are so close to reaching 11,500 subscribers. Help me get there, hopefully by the end of the week. I'll be honest, it's my birthday, so it'd be a really cool birthday present if we got to 11,500 subs on today's video. Let's round up the latest coaching buzz on today's Broncos Breakdown with yours truly, Matthew Peterson, as Denver has put together an early list of coaches they will be interviewing. They're probably going to add 2 to 3 more names to this list. I believe they interviewed 10 coaches altogether last year. So, first thing first, it is Black Monday. We have had some openings pop up, and probably the most impactful one to the Denver Broncos is the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is not really a huge surprise to me, but Cliff Kingsbury is done in Arizona. So that means Denver, Arizona, Indianapolis, Carolina, and Houston all have vacancies. And with that, the current candidates, the current 6 coaches who will be interviewing for the Broncos are Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, Dan Quinn, Ejiro Evero, Raheem Morris, and DeMeco Ryans. Now, like I said, I expect there to be a couple more names added to this list, but the reason why I bring up the opening so far is right now Denver is competing with 4 other teams to be the most attractive destination for the number 1 coach candidate this cycle, and that's Sean Payton, maybe Jim Harbaugh if he decides, yep, I'm coming back to the NFL here. So I want to bring up the Cardinals for a moment because I think Denver is probably ahead of Houston, right? They've had 2 one-and-dones. That's not very attractive. The Carolina Panthers, they got some money to spend. They got some draft picks, so that's definitely lucrative. Indy seems like a bit of a dumpster fire if you ask me. And then there's Arizona. Now the Cardinals fire Cliff Kingsbury, and I did like what Adam Schefter pointed out in this tweet, which is the Cardinals still have never had a head coach, any head coach, last longer than 6 years while the team has existed for over 100 years. Yeah, good trivia. It used to be the Chicago Cardinals. So, with that being said, though, maybe Denver is looked as the number 1 head coaching spot in this circle. I think I'm probably being a bit of a homer, a bit of a bias coming through right now. But what do you think the better head coaching job is? Is it Denver or is it Arizona? Because, yes, the Cardinals have Kyler Murray, and whenever you're looking to, as a head coach, pick a team, usually who the quarterback is going to steer you into that direction. Now, is Russell Wilson salvageable enough here? I've got some pros for Denver. Russell Wilson, and we're going to look at some stats in a minute. He played very well he played better down the stretch. Okay, I'll say that much. He played better down the stretch. The Broncos have a 2023 first-round pick. Now, it's not a very good first-round pick, but they do have one. And they have probably the best asset of all these 3, and that is great/rich ownership. Now, most people will say, hey, no one wants to go to Denver because you don't want to be tied to Russell Wilson. I'm going to shoot down that theory in 2 ways. The first way is I think we overestimate just how important the quarterback position or who the quarterback is when a head coach candidate picks what team he wants to go to, if he's that much in demand. You know what I mean? I don't think it is only a factor of who's the head coach, right? I think there is who the quarterback is. I think there is a bit more to it than that. Now, Sean Payton hopped on, or he's on the Fox Sports pregame show for NFL Sunday, and they asked him, like, hey, how important is the quarterback for you when you're picking what team you want to go to? And here's what he said. I think that's really about the triangular relationship. Ownership, front office, and coach. I think ownership and the functionality of the front office is most important. So there you have it. It's not, at least in Sean Payton's words, completely about the quarterback, right? And you know what? Denver, they've got pretty good ownership right now, right? They've got an ownership that's willing to put in $400,000 for one game to resod the field. So if Sean Payton is a man of his word and he's really saying or practicing what he's preaching, I would say Denver's got much better ownership compared to Arizona, which, have the Cardinals ever really been consistently good? No. They've been a roller coaster, right? They go up and down. The Broncos have the richest owners in the NFL, and as a head coach, that's pretty attractive to go to a team where they go, you know what? We're going to spend in free agency. We're going to give you the best facilities. We're going to do things at the top tier level. So for that reason, I think Denver might be a sneaky better opening than the Cardinals here. Now, Sean Payton, of course, has been rumored to be tagged with Vic Fangio, which could be kind of awkward, and you know why. Now, Michael Silver tweeting out, Fangio could potentially be in play in Denver as DC for Payton or Harbaugh. I now believe it's at least possible he'd consider that. Faith in new ownership and big money could help sway him. Would be awkward, though, just 12 months after he was fired as head coach. Yeah, that last sentence is probably going to be just too much to overcome. It'd be an NFL first. I don't know how you could re-enter that locker room when you had a lot of players there who, of course, you coached, and now you're just the DC. And to me, I couldn't stomach it. Like, that just, I couldn't swallow my pride. But, hey, money talks. And if Broncos ownership says you will be the highest paid DC and you might make more than some head coaches do, screw it. Let's run it back. Good thing I never sold my house up in Mile High. So with that, I want to tie in Russell Wilson, though. Ownership, in my opinion, when they meet with all these coaches and those 6 we talked about at the top of the video and they start doing interviews, I'm guessing these coaches are going to be wise and go, yeah, but what if Russell Wilson sucks next year and I'm one and done, right? Just like Nathaniel Hackett. My guess is ownership and George Payton will say, hey, you're not going to be judged. You're not going to be graded based on how Russell Wilson does in 2023. You are inheriting a bad contract, a sticky situation, and if it doesn't work out for Russ next year, don't worry, that's not going to be held against you. And that can get coaches to have a big sigh of relief of, okay, good, at least I won't be canned after 1 year. Plus, the Broncos will have their first-round pick back in 2024. Now, speaking of Russell Wilson, well, I just kind of bashed on him. His stats in the last 4 weeks, you got to admit, it's an uptick. Compared to weeks 1 through 13, he had 9 total touchdowns through the air and on the ground in the first 13 weeks. Compared to weeks 14 through 18, he had more in 7 fewer games. And a big part of that was, look at the rushing yards, right? And a lot of these rushing yards came the last 2 weeks under Rosberg. But 119 rushing yards compared to 158 in 11 games versus 4. Like, clearly Russell Wilson showed, hey, this isn't a whole lot, but it does prove Hackett was clearly the bigger problem this season. I think we all sort of wrestled and debated, is it Russ? Is it Hackett? It's probably both, but who gets a bigger piece of the pie? I think I said when Hackett got fired, it was 60-40, 60 on Hackett. I might have to go 70-30. Like, Russ had some bad plays, right? He missed KJ Hamler wide open against the Colts at home on primetime. Went to overtime and lost, right? He had some bonehead decisions, some bonehead picks in the Rams game. But Harbaugh and Payton might look at those stats and go, man, the last month, Russ quietly was not the disaster that he started off as. And I know I'm a quarterback whisperer. I can salvage this. And when some people look as a worst destination, I see a diamond in the rough. Now, where you at on this question, though? What is your level of faith in Russell Wilson bouncing back in 2023? Scale it 1 to 10. 10 being you are Russell Wilson right now. You are Mr. Unlimited, and you are saying you will be unlimited next year. 1 being we saw way too much this year. There's no chance. Zippity-doo-dah. He's going to be even worse in 2023. I am probably at a 3.7. Right? I've got to come down to earth a little bit. I would have been at like a 2 if not for the last couple of weeks, but I'll go with a 3.8. Put me down for a 3.8. We got some more news to get to here. As Ian Rappaport tweeted out today, the Broncos have requested permission to speak with Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Now, anytime you are asking permission from a coordinator to head coach, it gets granted. Coordinator, teams can decline it. So, one of their top candidates last year, which I'm sure Dan Quinn is going to go in his interview kind of giggling a little bit, kind of like, laughing of, weren't you the team that passed on me for Nathaniel Hackett and didn't give me a second interview, a third interview, whatever? Yeah, that was our bad. Sorry about that, DQ. Can you forgive us, please? Because Dan Quinn's Cowboys defense this year, once again, top tier. First in takeaways, 5th in points allowed. It's very difficult to get those 2 stats close to the bottom. Usually if you're producing a ton of takeaways, you're kind of a risk-taker secondary, and that can cost you, and that can give up chunks of yardage and then turn into points. Not the case. Remember, the Cowboys' defense before Dan Quinn got there was atrocious, and he quickly turned it around, and we all remember that's why he got the Falcons job, because he was the DC for the Legion of Boom in Seattle. Speaking of Seattle, he kind of knows Russell Wilson, right? The two overlapped in the Pacific Northwest, and the Broncos, in my opinion, are going to hire a coach with head coaching experience, which Dan Quinn has, and has a connection to Russell Wilson, right? Can go into that interview and say, I know how to get the best out of Russ. I was there when he was playing some of his best football. I'm the man for the job. Give the job to me. We've got more to get to in just a moment, but today's show is brought to you by BetUS. So when you go to chatsports.com/bet and use promo code Broncos125, not only are you going to get a 125% deposit bonus, but you can start putting some money down on the wild card weekend here. I'm starting to really fall in love with the Cowboys against the Bucs. The Bucs sucks. The Bucs suck. The Cowboys, awful in Week 18 against Washington, but they are a better team. Give me Dallas and a low spread, -2.5. I'll take it any day of the week here. Next up, let's talk about Jim Harbaugh. We spent almost a whole week. This show became the Jim Harbaugh show for a minute there. But Jim Harbaugh has kind of laid low a little bit. He's going to get some interviews with Denver and possibly Carolina as well. And who knows, maybe Arizona pops in the mix. But the reason why I bring up Harbaugh is because Adam Schefter today had a really interesting tweet where he talked about college football coaches graduating to the NFL. And since 2000, how have they performed? And one name really sticks out. I've got them in order of wins. Look at Jim Harbaugh, 44, 19, and 1. And he is surrounded by a lot of crap, right? Cliff Kingsbury, under 500, and by a mile. Chip Kelly, I thought he had a worse record than 26 and 21. But Butch Davis, he went from the U to Cleveland. Nick Saban, of course, we all know, didn't work in Miami. You know who couldn't even make it onto the list? The graphic wasn't even big enough to include Urban Meyer. But one name sticks out, and that is Jim Harbaugh. When he went from Stanford to San Francisco, and remember, those Stanford Cardinal days, he's got a lot of connections to the Broncos ownership here. Jim Harbaugh, at the end of the day, continues to be my number one candidate, just barely over Sean Payton. Not saying I don't want Sean Payton. Would like to have Sean Payton as this team's head coach next year, but if I had to pick one, I'm going to press the Jimmy Harbaugh button. All right, let's get some more news to get to here. So I saw an interesting tweet, and basically what the gist of this was, comes from Mark Kisler. Ignore the wrong profile picture there, my bad. If the Broncos had fired Nathaniel Hackett after the win in London and elevated Jerry Rosburg to head coach, they would have made the playoffs, yes, this season. And it's a fair point to bring up, I think. I don't think they would have made the playoffs. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But look what they did in Week 18. Like, yes, it was against the Chargers backups in the fourth quarter, but didn't seem like Justin Herbert would have won that game had he stayed in for all four quarters anyway. And so the point kind of remains, at least in my eyes, of, hey, I don't know if they would have made the playoffs, but now you're seeing what I was saying 2 months ago of fire Hackett once you know he's not the head coach. Why? Because you can win games. I never understood why that argument is always pushed down of it's not college football. You don't get to get a jump on recruiting earlier. There's no advantage to firing them midseason. You know what the advantage is? You could have been like the Panthers. You could have been right in the thick of the playoff hunt at the end of the season. Look at the Broncos schedule. This is after the Jags game. If they had left Hackett in London, even though it was a win, but in London, I bet they would have beat the Titans in Week 10. Malik Willis played that game, did he not? Week 11, a really sad overtime loss at home, another winnable game. Week 12 in Carolina, winnable game. Week 13, Tyler Huntley and the Ravens lost by 1, couldn't score a touchdown. Yeah, they just scored 31 against the Chargers yesterday, who played their starters for most of the game. Those 4 games right there, very winnable. And so if you had just gone 3-1 in that stretch, which is a big ask, but still, you absolutely would have been in the mix down the stretch. And maybe you have some more heart in Week 16 against a bad Rams team, right? Probably still get swept by the Chiefs. But hey, you would have been frisky. You would have been in the mix. You would have been in the hunt graphic on NBC, Fox, and CBS, which is really all you can ask for this team this season. That would have been a win in itself. If you could just have for one single night see the Denver Broncos in the hunt, right, during halftime of Sunday Night Football, that would have been a big success in my book for the way this year started. All right, I appreciate everyone for tuning into today's show. I'll catch up with you guys later with more Broncos news and rumors.